2 Timothy chapter 4, and we're going to pick it up again in verse 18. Been talking about this for, quite a few installments. Paul writes, "The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen." Sorry. Well, let's revisit the idea that how God delivers us from evil attacks may not be, and often is not, in the way that we would script it. He seems to have not a lot of concern for what we think would be most convenient, or at least less inconvenient. And God's view of our suffering is not the same as our view. And there's probably many reasons, but one big reason that I know of is that he sees the entire picture. And really, when you compare our lifetimes, even if we live very long lives, our lifetime, when set in the context of eternity, it's a speck. There's no way we could understand what God's sovereign plan is all about, how it works, why it does what it does. We don't have enough data for that. We would have to be able to see the entire story. And by the way, the entire story of the human race, human history, on eternity's line, this infinite line, is but a speck. All right, so there are many ways in which we probably will never be able to understand why things happen to us and to others as they do, until we're no longer bound by time. Well, I'm not sure, as I think about what Paul has written here, the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack. Paul, hey, knock, 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 McFly, right? Paul, by the way, okay, you're in prison, your death is impending, you've run the race, you fought the fight, you've kept the faith, and you're saying God will deliver you from every evil attack? Okay, Paul looks back and he looks forward. I've talked about this. You go back into what we have as the best biography of Paul's life after his conversion in the book of Acts. And then looking at his writings, his letters, which essentially were written after most of the book of Acts was written. And you realize time after time after time after time, Paul has been delivered. And sometimes, in Shakespeare's words, by the skin of his teeth. Not always. I almost was going to say just barely in one piece. And I suppose that's probably accurate. But my gracious, he sure didn't get delivered from all those evil attacks in a happy and unscathed sort of way. Boy, if we could see Paul's bare back, there would have been many, many, many scars. He'd been flogged. He had been beaten with rods. He had been stoned and left for dead. Those things don't leave you unmarked. I wish I could remember how to recite it verbatim, but C.S. Lewis wrote one time that God will bring us through, not without scars, but without stain. Meaning, God will carry us through, but it probably is not going to mean that it's all going to be just fine. No, there will be scars. I would think all of us have scars. Some physical, others emotional and spiritual. But God will deliver us. And Paul is saying this on the basis of his experience. God delivered him out of all of that. And so why would he not say, I have confidence. God's always done this, and he'll do it in the future. One of the deliverances that is hard for us to relate to is the deliverance of physical death. I don't want to sound morbid or suicidal at all, but the truth is, death for the believer holds promise of something far greater than what we can ever know in this life. And Paul talks about it. That not only will God rescue me from every evil attack, he will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. I do something pretty routinely that I want to recommend to you that has everything to do with the heavenly kingdom. The final two chapters in the book of Revelation, chapter 21 and 22, are John's word picture where he finds words inadequate for the vision of what heaven will be like. A new heaven and a new earth. There'll be no more tears, no more crying, no more sorrow or sickness or sadness, no more death. The tree of, there's this river that flows down the heart, the center of the city, which, oh, by the way, the streets are they're pure gold, as pure as clear glass. Can you see how I think he was at a loss to describe the overwhelming wonder and beauty of this heavenly kingdom. I read it first in a William Bailey book. It's basically a fairly long poem about heaven, and he says, throughout most of human history, it has started wars. It has been the source of envy. It has been the motivation for consuming effort in humans. It has been one of the highest, what would I call it, the driving motivators. Gold. In heaven, we walk on it. Well, the heavenly kingdom, I'll just say, I'm going to challenge you to, it'll take you 10 or 15 minutes, even if you're a slow reader. Carve out 10 minutes and read chapters 21 and 22 in the book of Revelation. Read it from the version that you most often use for your study and enrichment. And then maybe read it from a different version. My two favorite are the New International Version, and I actually prefer the 1983 version, edition of the NIV. I believe it's an accurate translation, and I really like the New Living Translation because it also is a valid and accurate translation. I've talked about this before. I'm going to just take a quick little detour to. Sorry, my throat gets dry these days. In terms of translation, there are lots of ways to translate anything from one language to another. Always, one of the difficulties is there is no one-to-one relationship. Let's say we're translating from Spanish to English. There's not a one-to-one word-for-word translation that if I'm translating my English into Spanish, that will come across with meaning to a Spanish speaker. I learned this firsthand when I went with Christ in Youth and helped them with an international youth conference in the Dominican Republic, where Spanish is the language. And I asked one of the girls in my youth group, this was back in the day when I was in youth ministry, who had, she was in Spanish 4. And for the people I knew, she probably knew more Spanish than anybody else. And I gave her my outline and I said, could you translate this into Spanish? And so she did. She didn't interpret anything. She just translated it. And when I handed it out, the kids looked at it and kind of gave me the eye like, what? Part of it is there's no one-to-one word translation, okay? And the other is our syntax is not the same. So here's the deal on the translations. Every translation, unless it is what is called an interlinear translation of the Bible, also is an interpretation because the words have to be arranged in syntax that works with English. And oh, by the way, Greek syntax is not the same as English syntax. So I sometimes hear people go, well, I just don't think that's an accurate translation. You know, I full of stories today. I remember a long time ago when our girls were little and we were on vacation and went to church at a little Christian church, and the preacher was of retirement age, and somehow in his message he got off on a buddy trail about how you can take your New American Standard Version, but it's not the Bible. You can, and he went on with, all these other versions of the Bible, and he held up his King James Version Bible. That's the Bible. Well, no. I at that point in time was carrying an interlinear Bible, and what that is, it has the Greek across the top, and the first line is Greek. The second line is the literal English translation, and the words are way out of order. You have to kind of rearrange them in your mind. And I thought, you can have your King James Version, but that's not the Bible. This interlinear, that's the Bible. Anyway, I burnt a lot of time to say, use a translation that is meaningful to you, and maybe even a paraphrase that's meaningful to you. But read chapters 21 and 22 of Revelation. Don't take your eye off the prize. the heavenly kingdom. Well, that's my challenge. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.